Okay, so last week we talked about what does it mean to be an owner? What does it mean to have an ownership mentality? And then we were really intentional about using outputs to evaluate our contribution, right? Because it's if we don't have adequate measurement of output, then what do? We default to measuring our effort and the time that we spent doing that. So in this second little coaching session about ownership mentality, I want to talk to you about what I would consider some hurdles, ownership hurdles, difficulties to get over to have an ownership mentality. Now, these are things that are programmed in each one of us just by growing up in this part of the country or in this country in general. And they're blind spots we want to think through in order to perform at our best. Now, as I promised you every week, I'm going to give you the answer to this question. Anybody remember what this stands for? Why should I care? I don't. You do. And here's why. Number one, improved performance. So just like last week, less work effort, less time spent working, better outcomes, improved performance based on the work you put in. And also better communication. And I'm going to show you how getting over these hurdles leads to an improvement in both of these areas. So, this is a little diagram. We're going to walk through the entire day. But what this represents is the primary flow of work responsibility. There's usually someone in executive leadership, someone in middle management or middle leadership, a person on the ground floor that's responsible for a task, right? This person sets the vision, this person adopts the vision, this person completes the workflow, and that's the task. Now, in this scenario, what I want you to see is that the hurdles that apply here also apply here if we have the same mentality toward ownership. So, what are those hurdles? Well, the first one is responsibility. Now, I'm a father of 4. Wonderful. Yes, had birthday Gage yesterday. He turned 11, and we're going to have a great time this weekend. When Gage was much younger, right around 6 or 7, Aaron and I were having a conversation in the kitchen. It was probably early December. I've told this story to a lot of you, but it's one of my favorites. And as we're having this conversation, I start to hear a sound. And it wasn't the sound of joy or playfulness. It was the sound of water dripping on my kitchen table, coming through a can light. Does anybody know what a can light is? A can light is like a light that is in the ceiling. So that means that water was where it shouldn't be. Drywall water, it's called drywall for a reason. So water's coming down. I look up and I know what's going on. Right above the can light is my children's bathroom. So I gracefully take off up the stairs and I open the door. And to my surprise and their elation, they're playing beach. Mm-hmm. Game I never have heard of. Let me give you how it's played. You take a bath towel and you place it over the threshold of the shower, which then creates an effect that pulls the water out of the shower into the bathroom. And the water flows freely as waves would at a beach. Yes. And so you can pretend like you're in the wave pool and you're swimming. There was so much water in the bathroom that I would, when you step in water, that scene from, who's seen Step Up, the movie, when they're doing that water dance scene? I was like, I don't know what's happening in here. It's kind of cool, but everybody's in trouble. So there's a lot of water. There's water everywhere. And, of course, I'm sure I said something like this. Now, is this a great choice? I did not say that. I said, whose children are you? In a very loud tone, and I sent them to their rooms. Now, what did my children respond and said, as I went to them and said, okay, as they all go to their rooms, I come to the first one, the oldest, the one who carries the honor, the leader. And I say, son, how did we get here? Why is there water everywhere? Why is there a fan and the carpet up? The carpet is up. That carpet should never come up. And he said, what did he say? My brother made me do it. Did he now? So we talk a little bit longer. We talk about responsibility. We say, if you're involved in that, you have to take ownership. Walk to Gage. And Gage, I say, Gage, what happened? Why did you let this happen? And to my surprise, he said, it wasn't my fault. I was just participating, and all of a sudden, Remy, my sister, is who did it. I said, well, now we know who did it. So I go to Remy's room. Remy Jean, yes, Father. Why did this happen? It wasn't my fault. I was just playing, washing my hands in the sink, minding my own business, and all of a sudden water rushed out. I said, really? Water rushed out as you were playing in the sink? Yep, wasn't my fault. Okay. Then what we have here is a lack of taking responsibility across the board. So we talked about that. And what a unique situation for them. We've all been there. I'm sure that some of us had a situation when we were children, when something happened and we were like, I definitely wasn't my fault. I didn't do that, right? I didn't take responsibility for that. And you guys have seen this all play out too, right? Like when I first started out, where's Tabby Cat? Is Tabby in the room? There she is. So the way we would do things is we would see patients, like tons of patients, like 15 a day. And then we would schedule surgeries. Tabitha was the only MA. She would make the surgical packets. NPs, get this, I would myself carry the surgical packets to the OR. Like, I can't believe it. Never happened. Prove it. Show me the pictures. And I would leave them with the OR nurse, and they would flip through it. And before I was naive, they would say, these are incomplete. They don't have everything in them, so what would I do? Tabitha. Tabitha. Okay, and here's what I learned. It's really easy in the moment to just get mad and blame something outside of my control. But that's the primary key to the hurdle of responsibility. When you refuse to take responsibility in an ownership mentality, you have now lost control. And so what I want you to see, so let's just take my example of the task of making surgical packets, right? So we didn't even have executive team. It's just me and Tab. So I said, hey, Tabby, I need surgical packets made. And then Tabitha makes the task. So at the end of the day, I can't get mad at Tabitha because I put Tabitha in the seat. I explained to Tabitha how to do the packets. I gave Tabitha the resources, right? So it's my responsibility because I'm owning it. It's my responsibility to make sure that happens well. As the leader of people, I'm going to go over this in detail in a second, you really only have two options. It's either you didn't communicate it well or you have the wrong person in the seat. And we're going to break that down a little bit more in just a second. Now, as you can tell, this task, that's not somebody named task, that's a task. That's something to be done. So either you can't perform the task, wrong person, or you don't understand how to perform the task, right? That's the two little disconnects. But at the end of the day, if you take responsibility, then you now have the ability to make a plan. So if Tabitha takes responsibility of the surgical packets, now she's not trapped in, well, I can't make it better if Dr. Masterson doesn't give me the stuff I need. Or I'm not going to be able to give adequate surgical packets because the OR nurses don't know what they're doing. If she takes full responsibility, then she can, on her own, improve the communication. On her own, tell me I need this, this, and this. Because now she can make a plan because she's taken responsibility. And honestly, what a better teammate, too. Because how many times have you seen a post-game interview from a football player who's like, yeah, if the line would have blocked a little better, I would have had a better game, right? Not my fault, the coach's fault. Not my fault, the offensive line's fault. Not my fault, the wide receivers weren't catching. That's not a good team, and that's not responsibility. That's not an ownership mentality. The next, I love this quote from Winston Churchill. It says, the price of greatness is responsibility. So that's honestly number one. If there's really no such thing as great team or bad team, great leaders. It's just bad leaders. And remember, everybody has a mantle of leadership in this flow. It just depends on what you're responsible for. Okay. Number 2, belief. Going back to my kids. So, the hurdle of belief is all about you not believing in the task that's been assigned to you. This is going to come as a shock to some of you. But my children, my boys, my young men don't believe in the responsibility of taking the trash to the curb. Taking the trash to the curb. You know why we do that? Because there's trash, and we have to take it to the curb so the garbage man will take it away from the house. And I don't know if you've ever assigned a middle schooler a task. It's usually something, this is what we want it to sound like. Father, thank you for this task, and I will complete it with honor, sir. No. That's not what happens. It's, fuck. I don't want to. Right? And so what's going to happen with that type of attitude when that little garbage can's going to the road? It's going to get dumped over. It's going to hit something. It's going to get dragged along. At one point, I'm pretty sure I saw the garbage can getting dragged up. And I was like, that's twice the work. Like, that's 4 times the work. But just mad at what they have to do. I don't want to take it. They didn't believe in the responsibility or the task being, I shouldn't have to do this. This isn't within my purview. Or the reason I'm doing this isn't valuable, right? If you don't believe in the task assigned to you, the amount of effort that you're going to apply to that task is probably pretty equivalent to knocking over a rolling garbage can and trying to drag it up a hill to just communicate how hard the task is. Kid you not, I've seen my child laying on the pavement in frigid weather saying, "No energy." Really? Yeah. Tick, 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 tick. Yeah. Yes. And I'll say, believe. I'll whisper it to you. But here's the evidence of belief, right? And you can, if you want to evaluate yourself or evaluate any coworker or any teammate, any family member, it's an attitude of I have to do it versus I get to do it. If somebody has an attitude of I get to do this, then they believe in what they're doing because it's an opportunity to apply the skills and the knowledge they have. If they don't believe in what they're doing, if they don't think it's valuable, the attitude is I have to do this. This is something I have to take off my list, or I've got to complete the task. If that's the attitude, then you don't have belief, and that's the hurdle then to having an owner's mentality. The next hurdle, skipped it, is ego. Ooh, man, this is a tough one for me. Just be honest for a second. And ego's going to cloud our judgment. Number 1, it's going to create conflict. And it's what leads to really having a lot of difficulty admitting mistakes. And let me tell you why. Because within the ego framework is a lie that is when you do something wrong or you don't do it to the best of your ability, the problem is you as a person, not your ability to do something. I'm going to say that again. If you don't do something well or you don't complete a task well, your ego is going to tell you it's you that's the problem. It's not the completion of the task that's a problem. And the only way to understand how to live through that is to walk through it. Sit in a meeting with someone who says to you, hey, love you, but what you're doing isn't great. The way you did that isn't meeting the standard it needs to meet. Nothing to do with you, just the performance. If you're having trouble splitting those, the hurdle you're dealing with is ego. Because you're assigning your value to the performance of a task as opposed to the fact that you were created by God with a purpose and a unique calling on your life. You can't live in the mentality of I'm only as valuable as the work I can give, not who I am and who I'm created to be. You've got to separate those two, otherwise you'll never be able to take feedback. The way to do that, to overcome this hurdle, is to practice. Get in a room. And trust me, I can promise you this. If it's hard for you to get feedback right now, and it's hard for you to separate those, ask for it. Pull your manager aside, pull a peer aside, and say, hey, can you give me some feedback on what the things I'm going through? If they say to you, no feedback, you're doing great, find somebody else. Because the moment you meet somebody who doesn't need to improve, me included, then you're meeting somebody who is not real. Because we all have fallen short, and we all have something to do better, okay? So you got to find somebody who's willing to tell you, every manager here is going to be willing to tell you, here's something you could do better, right? But it burns even a little less coming from somebody who's at your level too. So get engaged in those conversations. So when you're hearing that, you know it's nothing to do with you as a human being. It's everything to do with how you're doing that thing. And the only way to get better at that is practice it. Finally, complexity, the last hurdle. Gosh, this is one that I try to work through every day. It usually sounds something like this. I'll tell somebody a bunch of stuff, and then I'll say, does that make sense? And they'll look at me, and this is their facial expression. I want to say yes, but I'm not going to because I have no idea what you're talking about, right? Everybody here is like, gosh, I feel that in my soul. Ariana just came out of a meeting like that. She was like, I really want to be engaged. I like this vision, but I'm going to need you to run it back, right? Now, let me tell you how this falls into this, especially at this level where most of you have to deal with. It's obvious at this level. If I'm sitting up here like, hey, I want to do this, and this, and I want to do it by this, and this date, complexity gets really, really complicated really, really quickly, right? So there's a lot of complexity in communication learning that leaders have to go through. But the complexity in task completion is this direction. If you're doing something here, if I'm supposed to give an allergy shot, I don't understand. I can't be like, we're going to call the authorities because you need help, right? But if you have a task and you don't understand how to complete it, you're going this way. You're going to say to your manager, boss, supervisor, hey, I know that this is something you want me to do, or I know this is how I was taught to do it. Doesn't really make sense to me, and you are not, and I'm not really understanding it. Here's a true story. If this isn't an open line of communication, crazy things will happen, like giving patients expired shots for an entire year, right? I didn't even say that never happened. But honestly, like, if we don't have this open line of communication, then complexity begins to get muddled, and we just start to do something because why? What is the phrase we never say? That's the way we've always done it, right? That's not clarity. That's complexity. And so in task completion, it is the responsibility of the completer to make sure they have clarity in order to complete said task. So if you are output focus minded and you want an owner's mentality, these 4 hurdles are going to be the biggest roadblocks. And they're honestly most of the time in that order. Not wanting to take responsibility. And put yourself in the most recent situation when you had a potentially conflicting conversation, and it can even be in commercial business. So like you go to check in for a hotel, and they're like, I'm so sorry, sir, I don't see your reservation here. The immediate thought we have in that moment is like, well, so-and-so booked it. Well, I didn't book it. Somebody else did it. Or you're getting your to-go order at Starbucks, and they're like, oh, this is not what I wanted because I didn't order it, or you made a mistake, right? It's so easy for us to fall in that trap naturally, so start to try to break those habits and take an ownership mentality not only here, but also outside of here. Because if you do it outside, or if you do it here, it's going to translate across the boundary line. Those 4 hurdles are going to be the hardest: responsibility, complexity, ego, and belief. If you can get through those, the likelihood of you having an owner mentality is much higher. So, and I love this scripture kind of encapsulates the whole thing. It says, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. So if I've been given something, even a task, or I'm high in leadership, my responsibility to do that with an owner's mentality or to complete it excellently, those are the things that are going to get in my way. So here's your little assignment for today, and then we'll break for a couple minutes. I want you to take a few minutes and ask yourself this question. What is something you don't understand currently? So we're talking about this kind of flow, right? What's some complexity that I haven't addressed? And which hurdle gives you the most trouble? As you begin to reflect on those 4 things, partner up again. Choose the same partner if you want. And ask yourself which of those is the most troubling and which is something you don't understand. Thank you.